What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? If you want to hear interviews from industry pros, get first looks, and have access to endless comic content, wake up. Please wake up. You're in a coma. Your mother misses you.
What up, friendly neighborhood nerds? This is Judah Rad, and I'm here with Robo Strange and Respawn. Today, we have a very, very special guest. He's worked on DC's Crimes of Passion, Bitch Planet Triple Feature, Elk Mountain, The Black Experience, and now he's writing a two-part arc for Aquaman, featuring the art of Marco Santucci, the colors of Romulo Fajardo Jr., and of course, the letters of Clayton Cowles. Issue number 62... Of course, yeah. Issue number 62 dropped on the 18th, and number 63 will be available on September 22nd. Jordan Clark, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Awesome,
yeah. So you're briefly taking over from Kelly Sue DeConnick. You two worked on Bitch Planet together as well. Are you guys friends? What's it like working together?
Yeah, it's interesting just because obviously I think a lot of people are fans of Kelly Sue, and for me, I was a fan before I got the chance to work with her, but like getting the chance to work with her on Bitch Planet was kind of surreal, just because Bitch Planet is it's almost like an institution of its own at this point, like the fan base and just like what it means to so many people. So the fact that she was even opening it up for people to come in was incredible, but also just under the circumstances, like I had met her briefly when she did a signing here in Maryland at Third Eye Comics, like way back, and then I came and met her again when she was doing the whole show at Heroes Con in North Carolina. So I got a chance to like go up and like thank her for like her inspiration for me and kind of show her some of the stuff that I was working on. But that's kind of what got me in with Bitch Planet, was just kind of like having that chance encounter, and then her enjoying the work that I was doing. But getting the opportunity to kind of jump onto something like Bitch Planet, which is like, again, it's her baby, like her and Valentine.
It's huge.
Just kind of like doing this thing, and it's different from, say, even like a Batman or a Spider-Man or something like that, where this is a character that's been going on for so long, and there's all these wildly different fan expectations. Like, this is somebody's vision, and they're saying, why don't you take it for a little bit? And I'm just like,
no pressure, right?
So it was great to work with her on that, and then obviously getting the chance to come in and do the same with Aquaman. So like I call her my comics mom. It kind of feels like she's got like this. It's definitely kind of like a mentor relationship where she's somebody that I respect so much, not only just as a creator but also as a person. So like any time that we get to connect and not even just work together but just talk in general is always great. So very, very grateful to her for all her support and all that.
That's so incredible, man. Like, I can't imagine walking up to one of my favorite creators being like, here's a thing I made, and then being like, this is good, you should write in my universe. Like, that's pretty incredible.
It feels surreal.
Yeah, it's amazing. So for those that don't know, Bitch Planet Triple Threat, you had a story titled What's Love Got to Do With It? It's great. DeConnick describes the tone of the series as RoboCop, and I wanted to know, like, is that what you were going for? Did you have any tunes on while you were writing it? Like, what kind of headspace were you in? What kind of inspiration?
It's interesting because when I first got approached to pitch for it, my mind didn't go like dark, but I was definitely like, oh man, like this is like such a potent world with like so much opportunity to speak on so many different issues, and kind of make so many different points. So like I pitched some stuff that was like there was substance to it, but it wasn't funny like this one. Like it wasn't like a parody or anything like that. And they came back to me, and I think a couple of different people too, because I mean what they were saying was they didn't realize that people, like, it wasn't that people didn't take the book seriously, but they didn't realize that people had like put so much into the book and like kind of lost touch of like kind of the subversive, maybe like satirical nature of it. So they were getting a lot of very serious pitches, and they're like, oh no, but like it's funny too. Like you can it doesn't have to be so like draconian. Like you can kind of do something that's a little bit lighter. So that's when I came back with the What's Love Got to Do With It pitch. And definitely, yeah, like when she says that, at first you're like, is it like RoboCop? And then it's like, oh yeah, like no, I see it. Like I think again, people forget the subversiveness and kind of like the satirical societal commentary of RoboCop.
That's right.
And so
and Bitch Planet's also funny at times, right? Like it's got that cheesy, funny kind of and that's what lures you in, and what part of to me what makes it so horrific is
exactly. No, and that's why I was like, oh, when that clicked, I was like, oh yeah, make it funny, like make it a little bit more like lighter. So that's definitely the approach that I took.
Oh, that's cool. It's funny because when I was reading it, I actually laughed out loud a couple of times at your story. Like, so there's an ad on this protagonist's phone. Basically, she's probably about my age. I'm 28, and she's like trying to get a baby and a husband for her mum to be happy with her life. But she's got this ad on the phone where it's like, try new brand douche now in sensual Scotch flavor for his pleasure. And there's a dating app called Dick Pic, which is exactly what it sounds like. And like, I'm literally sitting there laughing because it's so close to reality. But are those long-standing ideas that you've had? Did you specifically come up with those for this universe? Are they trademarked? What's going on?
So, yeah, I mean, when I pitched something originally that had it had the clock in it, which was like, it's like a Fitbit for your ovulation. Uterus, I guess. Yeah. And it was something that I kind of like, I was toying around with, because like I had a lot of other different just dumb ad ideas for like the world of Bitch Planet, but that was the one they were like, oh, like go with that, like do the watch. So from there's certain things in the world of Bitch Planet that I was kind of like picking out from the background. So like the douche was like an already in-world product.
Wow.
But I was picking up on like all like the sodas for men, or like all these like weird things that we have in our world, where it's just like, why is this hammer for women? Like what? What? Like these are just regular things. Right. I don't understand. Yeah. So taking something like that, obviously in a very patriarchal world, it's like, yeah, of course, like the douche would be for him too, even though like he has nothing to do with it.
That's right.
And just, I love, I know it's not funny, and there's definitely like a lot of horrible things that are attached to it, but I love reading the different Reddit pages that are just like horrible messages that women have gotten from men on dating apps, just because I don't understand what's happening in like the initial, like, this is somebody that I like, I'm gonna show her my dick.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Like there's nothing in between, or it's like you're having a normal conversation and then like here's it. Yeah.
I'd like to know the chain of thoughts that connect those dots to here's my dick.
Yeah. So I was just like, why even like, why in this world that wouldn't be a thing? Like they would just cut to the chase, like just here's the dick like up front, and then you can choose if that's something you want to. Yeah,
that's right. That's how you cut down on unsolicited dick pics.
Yeah.
If you want that, just go to this app. You know.
Right.
There's a space for it. So, spoiler. The ending of this story. The protagonist has a baby, and the doctor brings out this fucking flesh card, and he's like, hey, you've qualified for a full tax rebate because your baby's white enough. So my question for you is, what did I ever do to you, and why did you hurt me with this ending?
So this is kind of the great part of being able to work with somebody like Kelly Sue, because me and the artist on the story, Naomi Frankie's, we had a lot of conversations back and forth about like, how should we end the story, and like what kind of things should we do, and like I think going off of what we were initially told by Kelly Sue, it's like, oh, like we should make it fun and like light, and then Kelly Sue came back and was like, what if this happened? And we were like, oh yeah, like what if like no, we're gonna go with that, like that's like a great idea with the like the tax rebate on the like is your baby white enough card, and I think
it feels like we're basically there.
Almost.
And again, when you think about just in general, like the amount of black women in particular, but women in general who suffer so many different maternity issues just because they're not cared or looked after by the doctors that are helping them deliver their babies. But then on top of that, having them have to go through that labor just to deliver somebody else's like white baby, I think is like, just a double layer of commentary that I think, sorry for hurting you, but like it's, it swerves in at the end when you're like having a good time, like, oh, okay.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
He lures you into this false sense of security. You're like, I'm having fun. It's funny. There's jokes. And then all of a sudden it gets to the end and you're like, oh.
Yeah. It's like one of those things where the smile stays on your face, but then all your emotion trades off. You're like,
that's it.
Oh. Yeah. So speaking of Kelly Sue, right? So she's clearly a boss, right? And so when you're like, what was the feeling? So you already had the feeling from picking up the little bit about Bitch Planet, but you also had when you got the news about Aquaman. Like, what was the feeling? So you get the news, like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's again, I can't say enough about her, and not only her work, but just her character and her determination really to kind of extend that goodwill to so many of us younger creators out here and make the time for us, but also try to make the space for us. So I had a little bit of an in because I did a anthology earlier in the year, the Crimes of Passion anthology. And so that was kind of like working proof that like I can do this, like, sure. I've got some skill, and so before the pandemic hit, they already knew that they kind of wanted to do something with Jackson, and there was going to be a little bit of space near here at the end to do it. And so, I knew some of the editors that were working on the book, and then, Kelly Sue obviously knew me, so she kind of said, this is a natural connection. Like, let's just see what he's got in terms of a pitch. And so I was able to send them something in, which they liked. And they liked it so much, they were like, why don't we just do 2 issues? Like, this could be like a 2-part story, which would give Kelly Sue a little bit more time to kind of build up her big finale here at the end. So, yeah, I mean, again, Bitch Planet is amazing, and getting to work on that world is awesome. But also, like, I'm a big superhero fan, Marvel and DC growing up. And so having that chance to kind of get to play with the toys and, work in this world is always amazing. So, I just wanted to go in and, do the best that I could. But I think, having the support of not only Kelly Sue, but also, all the people at DC, I think was extra special, just because, I think so many times you go into spaces and you think like, they're not going to say yes to this. Like, there's something that they have in mind, and like, I need to stick to X, Y, and Z. But I kept presenting stuff and they were like, yeah, no, let's go with that. Like, that sounds good. And I'm just like, okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So when you're doing this kind of stuff, do you ever suffer from like imposter syndrome? Do you ever like enter into those like, wow, I'm not supposed to be here, but then your stuff hits and it's great and people love it?
I think I'm not going to speak for all of us. I don't know if we all have that feeling, but I don't know if I'd go as far as calling it imposter syndrome, but I definitely do look at stuff sometimes and I'm like, is that good? Like, is somebody going to like that? Is
right. That
enjoyable? Makes sense. And, you always have to talk yourself out of it. But I think really specifically for stuff like this, any superhero book in general, one, just the recognition that so many people are going to read this. What are the odds that everybody's going to love it, right?
That's right.
If you're going into it thinking that I'm going to get 100% approval rating from everybody and like everybody's going to be like, this is awesome, you're obviously getting ready for some big disappointment. But also, I've started to get myself into the headspace of, not just with my art, but what other people do as well, is like, but does it have to be perfect? Like, does it have to be like, do things still carry value even if they're not the best thing that's ever been done?
Sure.
And it's easy to always kind of nitpick at stuff, specifically when it's your stuff. But being able to be comfortable with like, it was pretty good. Like, could I do better? I guess, but like, I had fun making it, and I hope people enjoy it. But when you get kind of stuck in that space of like everything has to be like the most perfect thing that's ever been done, and like everything's going to be Watchmen, everything's going to be Dark Knight Returns, everything's going to be like changing the paradigm of comics. You're also setting yourself up for failure when it's just like, oh man, like that didn't revolutionize comics, that one issue of Aquaman. So I try to keep myself in a space where I've put in a lot of work, and so I feel like I have to remind myself that I do deserve to be here. Like I did do all the things to get to this place, but also that you shouldn't take it for granted, because a lot of people want to be in the same space that you are. But also like you should enjoy these accomplishments and really kind of savor these moments. So
that's awesome.
I don't know if I feel like an imposter, but I do feel like I have a ways to go, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wouldn't say what we do is art, and we're definitely not comic book creators like you are, but we could definitely relate to a lot of what you said as far as like putting stuff out there and be like, is this bad? Like,
is this good?
But getting back to...
I disagree with that. If you look at our videos from 2 months ago versus today, Robo's editing skills are just like off the chain. Like, he's gotten insane.
Yeah, I'm fucking awesome now. So no, just kidding. What's the opposite of imposter syndrome? So getting back to Aquaman, so you said that you put forward the pitch. Was this the pitch that you already had in the chamber ready to go? And also, do you have any other pitches ready to go? Like if they offered you more time.
99 pitches.
Yeah. I love Jackson, and obviously Jackson is kind of different. If people are familiar with Jackson from like Young Justice, where he's called Aram, it's a little bit different in the comics. Like he's
time out for 2 seconds. Sorry, I'm gonna cut in right after the question, but my laptop's about to die because my plug's way over there for some reason. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Cool.
I think the Roomba pulled it out.
I always love looking at people's bookshelves. I'm just wondering, like, what are on these shelves back here? I'm trying to
Marvel books, Valiant books, DC books, Image books down here, more Image books down there, and then more Marvel books, and then a bunch of other just silly knickknacks.
Okay.
I have a Lego Ellen Ripley right here, which I.
Nice.
Oh, hey, and I found this in a dumpster. Literally, it was just sitting next to a dumpster.
Wow.
And it's an awesome Vader. I mean, I cleaned it, but yeah, like...
Sure.
That is his prized possession. He has shown that at least 28 times now, so...
It's something to be proud of.
It is. Yeah. All right, so we're going to go ahead and...
My father.
Yeah. So, blah, blah, blah. Did you already have that story in the chamber? Do you have anything else in the chamber? All right. And then you can kick it off. We'll do 5, 4, 3, 2.
So yeah, I think I love Jackson as a character, and for people who are familiar with him as Calderon from Young Justice, it's a little bit different in the comics. Like he's still Black Manta's son. He's not from Atlantis. He's from Zebel, which is like a separate Atlantean kingdom. But since Kelly Sue introduced him like a couple issues ago, I've always been like, man, like it would be cool to see him do, X, Y, and Z, and like not necessarily like writing anything formal for him, but kind of just thinking about, like what would Jackson be doing right now? So when they kind of introduced the idea of, like we want to do this Jackson side story, like do you have anything? I was like, I think I have a few things that we could try, and getting the opportunity to kind of get a little sneak peek at what Kelly Sue has coming up, I think kind of helped me figure out and plan, this story and where to take it. As far as other things, I definitely have some stuff that I would like to do if given the opportunity. I think DC and Marvel and like any other big company, I'm the person who is always just like, But what about Detective Chimp or like Space
Yeah.
Cabbie or like this weird character that nobody else remembers and like
Yes.
has only been in like 6 issues?
Mhm.
And I'm sure they're just like, okay, I mean,
Yeah.
like, that's gonna sell great, but maybe we could try it. But I think I have some ideas that are more based in kind of how superheroes relate to not even just the real world, but just a superhero's relationship to their community, which I think is something that is, has been explored and talked about. But it is interesting to just kind of like think about the worlds that these characters live in, and not only how they're viewed by the people who live in their cities, whether it's Gotham or Metropolis, but also just generally what their relationship is and should be, because like some of them are working in conjunction with like local government, the police and other places. Some of them are working with like extra like governmental agencies like the DEO or like other places like that are kind of like secret, and some of them are just like straight up vigilantes. And like what, depending on what level you're operating at, like how responsible are you for property damage and like all these other things where you might have saved the day, which is great, but also there's still ramifications for those actions. And kind of you're not going to be viewed the same way from one segment of the community as you're going to be viewed by other segments of the community. So I have a few ideas that kind of play off of that with different characters. So
seems like very relevant as well, because we're kind of living in a time where like law enforcement is either disconnected from the community or even against the community. So I could definitely see that like playing out with that dynamic.
Yeah, I think superheroes are, I mean, they're extensions of us, right? Of kind of like power fantasies in general. But also, they can be reflective of society as a whole, and kind of like what they value and what they represent. I think can speak a lot to the world that we live in as well. So
absolutely,
absolutely. What I would like is to see you helm a more extended run with Jackson. Is there any chance of like maybe a spin-off title with you?
Man, I would love that. I think the cool thing that I got to do with these 2 issues is really kind of plant seeds, for Jackson and his future, and hopefully I will be there to sow those seeds. But whether it's me or somebody else, we definitely set up some cool stuff for Jackson to kind of explore later on. So I think he's a character that I feel just has so much potential, not only as like a young gay black superhero, but as somebody who is just kind of still trying to find themselves in so many different ways as a person, as a hero, and has the shadow of Black Manta kind of cast over him as like his dad isn't like Polka Dot Man. It's like he's one of the like greatest supervillains in the history of the world and has tried to like destroy the planet several times. So it's like, how do you not only be a hero with that kind of cast behind you, but also like very real possibility that like you and him are going to come into contact and to like actual like battle many times going forward, and like kind of preparing yourself for that possibility. So I think there's so many cool things to do with Jackson, and really honestly the greatest part of this week so far has been hearing from different people telling me that like I'm X years old, and like this is the first time I saw myself in a comic book. Like this is the first time I was able to read a story and like fully see myself as like a gay black man in a superhero comic. So
that's
awesome. Jackson's ability to affect change not only in the DC universe itself, but also outside of it, from a reader's perspective. Like I feel like he can open a lot of doors for younger readers to kind of get into the DC universe. So hopefully, for me, there's a place in that. But even if not, I feel like Jackson deserves a spotlight and definitely will be in good hands in the future.
So you kind of set me up for this, and I appreciate it. Personal question. So you've talked about how this is what this has meant to the other people who have read it, and you kind of talked about the character dynamics and elements of these characters and what they're struggling with, what they're dealing with, and what they're like. How much of yourself is in this story, and how much have you kind of projected your own experiences into the narrative?
So I'm Black and Puerto Rican. Not a part of the LGBTQ community, but like have so many friends who are, gay and trans and so on and so forth. And so, for me, the two most important things that I wanted to get across with the story is one is that Jackson is Black, which is something that you can obviously see when you look at him, but also, there's so much depth and variety to the Black community and our experiences, and those are things that aren't often communicated and can't just be communicated by looking at us. And so I wanted to get across just kind of like who Jackson is and how he relates to, his Blackness and just his family history and his story in that way. But just by looking at him, you probably couldn't tell he was gay. And so I wanted to get that across, very clearly as well. Mm-hmm. And I think within the first couple of pages, you can see that, he basically alludes to it. Mm-hmm. And with, so many of my friends, my queer friends, like I've heard time and time again about, their experiences consuming media, reading stories, watching TV shows, and just kind of having to be like, is that person gay? Like, it seems like they might be, but I'm not sure. And then, yep. The stories will kind of like go further and further, and like just when it's about to happen, it's like, they're just cousins, or like they're like, mm-hmm. Something like that, where it's just kind of like, almost but not quite.
Or you never say anything about it, but you tweet and say they were, and that's supposed to count.
Yeah. Right. Right. And I didn't want that, for people reading the story. I wanted it to be very clear, who Jackson was as a person. And so, I was able to put, some of my own life experiences into it, but also kind of draw on, people that I know and their experiences and kind of place that into the story. And I live in Baltimore, and Black Manta's from Baltimore, so I was able to make that connection.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, definitely there's parts of me that I tried to put in there. Jackson's love of Janet Jackson is something that I took from me and put in there.
So your dad is not a supervillain, or
not that I know of. I've been out of the house for a number of years, so I can't.
So it's possible
what he's been up to. Yeah, I mean, you never
headline.
Here's an important follow-up question. You said you are Black and Puerto Rican. Do you speak Spanish?
Not a lot, not fluently, but it's interesting. Like my middle school Spanish teacher was Jamaican, and so like through her accent, it was kind of difficult at times to pick up what was trying to be said.
Right.
But because my mom was Puerto Rican and Spanish is different, like there's some things that are just constant across, cultures and different communities, but like Puerto Ricans speak distinct kind of almost Americanized Spanish that like there's a lot of words and like different things that are like they will kind of convey what you mean, but like they're not in an actual Spanish dictionary. So
I'm Puerto Rican, and so I don't speak Spanish. I'm very happy to hear that someone else is Puerto Rican doesn't speak Spanish either. So that's great. That's all I wanted to get at.
Yeah. No, I mean it is a wonder at just how I don't know if you had the same experience with your family where like the speed at which they go back and forth between English and Spanish, and then the Spanglish words they'll throw into it. You're just kind of like, okay, like I guess I'm not picking this up.
That's right.
It's funny because, like, as Caucasian people, Judah and I are just like, we have no idea. Like, we hopped on a call with Robo and another partner channel. We've got Cypher a while back, and they. So Cypher, does he speak Spanish? He speaks Spanish-ish. Yeah.
He makes sure to remind me of that every time we talk. So yeah.
Okay, good. But they were talking about the exact same thing you were just talking about, where like, depending which part of the world you're in, speaking Spanish depends on what kind of Spanish you get. It's just all over the shop, which is really fascinating. So I want to know, how much Aquaman reading did you do before you started writing this, and if people like your 2-issue arc, what else should they read?
Yeah, I read way back when it was coming out, I read all of the Jeff Johns run of Aquaman. It kind of continued on with that, like some of the Jeff Parker stuff, and I think Cullen Bunn picked it up for a little bit after that. And I know Dan Abnett started the Rebirth run, similar to like New 52. Like when Rebirth came out, there were just so many comics, and I was like, I don't know which ones to read.
What do I read? Yeah.
So Aquaman, unfortunately, was one of the ones that I kind of came to a little bit later. But obviously, once Kelly Sue jumped on, I jumped on and have been reading from the beginning of her run. So I had enough general Aquaman information and like knew enough about the character. And then for Jackson, like I've seen the first 2 seasons of Young Justice. I haven't seen the newest one. But in the comics recently, he's mostly been in Teen Titans. So I got to catch up on a decent amount of that. So if people like these 2 issues, I would go back and read some of the Teen Titans stuff. I think is probably the closest to who Jackson is, and that was kind of the last time that he appeared in comics before coming back for Kelly Sue's run. And I mean, watch Young Justice. It's different, it's obviously not like a 1-to-1, but it is kind of cool to see the different ways that Jackson Calderon is portrayed in 2 different mediums.
That's really cool. You don't have to answer this question. I'm hoping that you will, or you can just make something up. But we always try and get, I don't know, just some kind of juicy goss, and we want to know, what is it like inside DC? Are there any cool rumors or stories or insider's insight you can share?
Want to talk shit about anybody?
Yeah.
It is an interesting dynamic now because like I don't have any of that. So I'm kind of like,
it's bizarre, right? Because most people are distanced these days anyway, like this year especially, so it's hard to ask that question.
Right.
Is there anything that took you by surprise working for that publisher?
Well, I think what's interesting is whether or not there was a pandemic and whether or not there was massive change happening at DC. I think one of the things that is kind of clear is that comics as a business, was coming to a point where things probably were going to change sooner rather than later, which is fortunate and unfortunate in a lot of different instances. But I think looking at digital distribution as kind of just a norm, not just in comics, but in, publishing and in, TV and, even now, like they're going to put Mulan on Disney Plus. Like, they said they weren't going to do it, like a month or 2 ago. And they were just like, I guess we're going to do it now. I think for us as fans, we look at a lot of stuff and, our minds are so preoccupied with these characters and these stories and all the things that they represent. And sometimes it's easy to lose sight that it's still a business, which is kind of, the unfortunate, side effect of,
Monetizing creativity,
monetizing creativity and just general monopolies. Like, it's not, DC is beholden to Warner Brothers, which is beholden to AT&T and like so on and so forth. And so, a lot of times us as fans looking at things and saying, what? Like, that's crazy. Why would you cancel that book? Why would you do this? Like, this doesn't make sense.
High-level corporation.
Yeah, like stuff is so far out of people's hands and control that, one, it's always terrible and unfortunate when people have to, lose their jobs, specifically in the middle of a pandemic for any reason. But also, like it wouldn't it be great if like we could have like 1 million books and like everybody's working and like doing all kinds of things.
Right.
But the way that I look at it is, from any comic publisher perspective, I think the thing that we have to focus on is really how can we get new readership, into comics, and how can we grow the fan base so that comics are as ubiquitous as they used to be, a long time ago when comics were everywhere and you could pick them up at any place and they were just a part of the culture. Because when you look around the world, like people read comics not just in like Japan as like manga, but like in certain European countries, comics are a serious art form that are still talked about and enjoyed by adults. South America, a lot of places comics are, a big part of the culture. And so, there's still obviously the stigma of comics being a kid's medium and, something that's, not really mature, even though that's been proven false time and time again.
Yeah.
I think if we can, take the opportunities as they come to still, show why these characters are important and, the reach that they can have. And, just make sure that we are, trying to reach as many different groups of people as possible and,
Nice.
show them in the comics world. Then, hopefully, there's a little bit of a downturn right now, but, you look at 2, 3, 4 years from now, hopefully we're back in another upswing and there's just work for everybody,
That'd be nice.
It's never going away. That's for sure.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
And I told people too, like during the beginning of the pandemic where everybody was freaking out, Batman, Superman, X-Men, all that stuff, great. People love it. But like Raina Telgemeier is still gonna eat, and she's like on top of all of this. Whatever people think about, these superhero comics, like she's selling millions of copies of her books, and so are other people who are making comics. They're just not making superhero comics. So like the comics industry and the comics as a community and the art form is still very healthy and still thriving. But when it's easy to shrink it down to just Batman and Spider-Man, but like when you look at it from a longer view, like there's a lot of good things going on. It's just a matter of obviously everybody is kind of in a tight spot right now. So when things start to get better and everything starts to recover, there will be a lot of great content out there for people.
Fascinating. We talk about that a lot on here, the future of comics, because we always have really no idea how it's going to end up. So it'll be interesting, to see how it goes over the next decade or so. You mentioned Crimes of Passion. I read that Batwoman short story that you wrote, and it was awesome, because I'm a fan of entering into an existing relationship and there's all this tension, like the first scene, you've got, is it Kate and Maggie meeting up in a morgue, and they are obviously not on the best of terms at the moment, and there's all that like dialogue back and forth that's a bit snarky, which I really enjoy. What I want to know is like, it was very satisfying too in terms of like how it resolved. Are there any other ships that you want to write, or that you want to see?
Yeah, for me that was kind of number one. So it was like, oh cool, I get to do this.
Nice.
Because I think Kate and Maggie, like there's the Kate, Maggie, Renee, Montoya triangle where it's kind of like who should be with who. And I think I always come back to Kate and Renee kind of almost being too close to the same person, where they're both kind of very like headstrong people that will make brash decisions on the spot. Right. And like Maggie is a little bit older and a little bit more world weary, and she's gonna be the one to say like, all right, wait a minute, like we should probably think about this before we like break into this building or like, do this crazy thing.
Less of an enabler.
Yeah, and so I think Renee and Kate are great together, but just in terms of like what's gonna work long term, I think Maggie is probably somebody who is probably a better, more stable kind of like anchor point for Kate. I love.
Doesn't have to be just DC, by the way. I'm just curious
right.
who you. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Ralph and Sue Dibney, Elongated Man and his wife. I think reading the early Elongated Man stories, which are they're crazy because they're like kind of that Silver Age, but typically it's like they roll into a random town. Elongated Man's nose twitches. He's gonna go solve a mystery. Sue's like, great, I'm gonna go buy some shoes, and like they go, they split up. And like Ralph does his thing, and then she comes back, and he's like, I busted up this crime ring, and she's like, I got a great deal, and then they like, go on with their day. And I think what I love so much about it is there's just a very like domestic nature to them, where obviously like Ralph is off having all these adventures and doing all this crazy stuff, but Sue is like very supportive of him, but it is kind of like, if you've ever had a significant other where, there's this thing that you love and you're like, oh yeah, like I'm going to go do this thing. And you keep talking about it, like, yeah, that's great. I'm going to go not do that.
Honey.
Yeah.
Do something else.
Right.
And they just love each other. And I think that's something that's kind of obviously stories, obviously tension and kind of these push-pull points, but like them and like Justice League International and Justice League Europe, where like, they're just having these kind of, quaint, just like loving, reactions. And then in 52, which was like, let's literally drag them to hell. But at the end, they're like ghost detectives together, and like they're going to be together forever. So I definitely enjoy that. I do like ship between Marvel and DC sometimes.
Interesting.
Because I'm just
together.
Robin and Jubilee for life.
There you
Robin
go.
and Jubilee, amazing. Who did I like? I liked She-Hulk. I like She-Hulk and Blue Beetle.
Oh,
Blue
nice.
Beetle. Wow.
Because I think Blue Beetle is just so he's kind of so over the top and definitely has this goofy side.
Yeah.
But I think She-Hulk is definitely somebody who's also kind of like not serious all the time.
Right.
And just kind of even thinking about like the Mr. Miracle and Big Barda kind of like literal size difference, but also just kind of like like Big Barda is like the protector, like she's the one who's going to come in and like handle that kind of business, and Mr. Miracle is kind of the okay, and I'm going to figure out how we're going to get out of here, and I feel like they could have that kind of relationship where they're just going on goofy adventures through space or through time. They steal Booster Gold's time machine and just
Amazing.
go on some random adventures. So
I could see that. I could also see
now
like
I
the
wanna
whole.
know-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Now I want to know if Blue Beetle and She-Hulk had a baby, what color would it be? Would it be like cyan?
possibly.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I just imagine Blue Beetle just kind of like him being this like 5'9" dude, super proud of his 7'5" girlfriend, and doesn't even care what anybody thinks. Like, I love her so much.
Oh, cute.
Well, and they're both always just kind of like unlucky in love kind of people. Like they're
Right.
always having those weird relationship troubles. So like find each other. Like
That's right. That's right.
cross the companies.
So yesterday we got a lot of big news from DC fandom. I didn't see all of it, but I did see some stuff like Milestone Comics coming back and stuff like that. Representation. What do you think about? Well, I was going to ask about DC in general, but I think DC yesterday showed us like they're willing to go in the right direction for representation. Not saying everything's perfect, but in comic books in general, what do you feel about the culture of representation, and are we moving in a positive direction with that?
Yeah, I think that really, I mean, from comics to really any other medium and industry, like come a long way. Still got a long way to go, right? Like there's still so much work to be done, which doesn't mean that we should overlook the work that has already been done, because I mean it's great to see, for me as a comics creator, to look around and see people like Vita Ayala and Danny Lore and Ronna Romberly and Ezra Clayton Daniels, and even people like Ta-Nehisi Coates and Roxane Gay and Annette Okorafor, and people coming into comics. There's definitely a lot of great Black and Latinx, and even Marvel doing like the indigenous collection that's coming out later in the year.
The covers. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's so many great. I think the thing about it is like there's so many great creators from so many different backgrounds, right? And when you look at how many comics come out on a monthly basis, like there's definitely not the representation doesn't match the talent level as well as the readership,
Right.
and so I think is there ever going to be a one-to-one? Like, is there ever going to be like for every white person there's going to be a Black person, there's going to be an Asian person, there's going to be like that's not possible. But at the same time, like when you look at Marvel and DC in particular, right? I think we look to them a lot just because of, the reach and the impact that they have with those characters. And, just the possibility of, wouldn't it be cool to see, say, like, Kamala Khan in an Avengers movie? Like, that would be amazing, right? But at the same time, when you look at, an Image or Dark Horse or, Boom or, these other places, like, we should be there too, making stories for them as well. So I like, some of the things that I see going on. But I feel like we shouldn't be satisfied yet in terms of like not only what is possible, but also, just looking at representation on the page, but also representation, in terms of creative teams and in terms of like editors and in terms of the people running these companies, and making sure that, that's kind of seen all the way up to the top, that we have, people in all different parts of, these comic companies, because it's important to kind of have, that line where, if you're a creator, you can feel like, somebody has my back up there, you know what I mean? And they're going to want to help me see this through.
That's right.
And that's bigger than comics too. That's societal.
That's right. So. But I think we could all agree that as long as you change the profile picture in your Twitter to a rainbow flag or Black Lives Matter fist, then
that's right. Yeah.
Then we've made it. We're there. We're there. Yeah. So I was reading on your website. It says that it was kind of hard for you to get comics growing up, right? What is your collection like now? To make up for that.
Like you said, there wasn't a comic shop around me when I was growing up, and it wasn't until I moved here to Baltimore and was going to college that there was like a dedicated comic book shop around. And so I remember like that first year that I started getting comics, I went from like no trades to like 50 something trades, and like just a couple, because I was like, all of these things, like so it's pretty solid. I'm kind of looking over at my shelf now. I'm not at Judah's level, in terms of just like
very few people are, so that's not a but that bar's too high.
You probably have more friends and disposable income.
That's right. Yes.
But it's pretty, I mean, it's getting there. I think, there's always stuff. This is the most frustrating thing to me as, a collector of comics, is that there's so many amazing comics that people are always like, you need to read this and you need to get this. And then I look for it and then I'm like, that's not in print. Like, where can I get this? Like, the James Robinson Starman, everybody's like, you need to read Starman. And I'm like, okay. And I go to look for it and it's like, oh, this trade is $70.
Yeah.
I guess I won't be reading that anytime soon. And like, same thing with The Truth, Red, White, and Black. It's like, oh, like this is a great Captain America story. You need to read it.
I've been looking for an affordable version of that trade for like a year.
Yes.
You can't find it.
No, it's always like the lowest I've seen it is like $80, and I'm like, I want it, but I don't know.
You know what's really bizarre is I'm a fan of hardcover trades just for how they look on the shelf, and I wanted the Harbinger series, and it blows my mind. So they put out the deluxe edition, Harbinger Volume 1 Deluxe Edition hardcover, normal price $30, whatever it is, $20. I'm like, okay, cool, boom, put that in the cart. Volume 2. $120, and I'm like going on eBay. I'm looking at like, what is special about Volume 2 that it's like triple the price? It's bizarre.
Made a go.
Yeah, and nobody can answer the question. I'm like, I ask people. I'm like, they're like, I don't know.
Well, it's wild too. I mean, when you think about yesterday when they announced all the milestone stuff, like I have been digging in dollar boxes for milestone stuff for years because I'm just like, there's no other way to read this, so I need to find as much of it as possible. So I'm hopeful that all this stuff that hasn't been collected for a long time will finally get to be collected again, just because the it's important that it exists, but it's also important that people can like get it and like read it.
Right, that's right. You want to support it, and I really would rather not have to support it by filling my Comixology playlist up.
Sure, right.
But
cool. So before we stop, I have just another question, and I understand, I get how it is, but I gotta ask this. To. Is there anything super secret and cool that you can tell us about that's coming up in the future
Something
or
you're
tease?
working on.
And it doesn't, and that you're working on, and it doesn't. Maybe it could be DC. That'd be cool. But even if it's not DC, just what can we expect from you in the future?
So I have a few projects that are in different like states of existence that hopefully are all coming out within the next couple of years. And so I'll tease them in a broad sense so that you can kind of get an idea of what they might be like without giving too much away. So I have a graphic novel that I'm working on that's inspired by Parliament Funkadelic and Sun Ra and kind of that like
nice
Afrofuturist science fiction that was happening in the 60s and the 70s, and kind of applying it to modern day issues. So I'm hopeful for that. That will be one of the sooner things that gets put into production. I have a story about kids here in Baltimore fighting back against gentrification from another world. So it's kind of like Attack the Block meets They Live. That's kind of what I'm going for.
Nice.
I have a graphic novel that's about, specifically if you know about the Salem witch trials, there is a woman named Tituba who was this black woman who was kind of at the middle of it. And she's been in stuff like The Crucible and like other adaptions, but just like she lived through all of it. And there's several other black women that were in the Salem witch trials that also lived through it. And I just found all that to be like an amazing like true story about like this insane period that happened where we survived, which doesn't always happen. So
So you said there's varying levels of existence on this thing. That's one that got my brain. Is that like towards the creation end, or is that an idea? Is that script you're writing, or?
That's something that I've been scripting and I have an artist for, and we've talked to some people about. So that's one that is kind of, again, a little bit further along that hopefully we can kind of get in.
Sounds really cool.
Guess I'll have to keep an eye on your webpage. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think the last one is I'm working with a few other writers and artists, and we just want to do a magical girl story about just like diverse group of girls living in the city who kind of get magical girl powers. So we're that's a little bit earlier on, but we're talking about it now, and hopefully that'll be something that happens. So I've got projects in the works.
Awesome. That's awesome to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Jordan Clark. Go check out his latest issues of Aquaman. We'll have links to where you can get it. We hope you get it from your local comic book store, but if you don't have one near you, then we'll put links on where to get it. We'll also put links to Jordan Clark's webpage so we can hear more. Jordan Clark, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us some of your time.
Yeah, really appreciate you guys. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
Take it easy. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Take care.
Because of the threats. Thank you for watching Judah, Robo, and Ree. We talk about comics, movies, and TV. Sometimes we have notable guests, and sometimes it's just us. But we're also cool.